How did you build this from nothing? I saw a gap in the market that no one else was paying attention to.
The conference room smelled like expensive coffee and ambition. Ashley stood near the back wall, holding a leather portfolio she wouldn't need to open, watching Liam command the room the way he always did. Effortlessly, magnetically, completely. An investor leaned forward, all interest and checkbook energy, and asked the question that should have included her name. How did you build this from nothing? Liam smiled, the smile that made people want to give him things. I saw a gap in the market that no one else was paying attention to. Everyone said it couldn't be done at this scale, but I knew if I could just get the infrastructure right, the rest would follow. It took about 2 years of sleeping 4 hours a night, living off cold pizza, and refusing to quit when every reasonable person told me to walk away. Ashley's hands tightened on the portfolio. She knew the taste of that cold pizza. She remembered those 2 years. She had built the infrastructure he was describing, written the processes he was crediting to his instinct, solved the problems that would have ended this before it started. But she didn't say anything. She never did. Ashley had learned a long time ago that there were certain kinds of men who didn't hear women's voices unless those voices were agreeing, praising, or yielding space. Liam wasn't cruel about it. That was part of what made it so hard to name. He didn't silence her with anger. He silenced her with certainty, with a kind of confidence that made her doubt whether her version of events was even real. The investor nodded, visibly impressed, already mentally drafting the wire transfer. That's the kind of vision we're looking for. Single-minded, resilient, someone who doesn't need a committee to make decisions. Ashley felt something small and sharp lodge itself beneath her ribs. Not anger, not yet, just the dull, familiar ache of being erased in real time. Liam glanced back at her then, his expression warm, inclusive, performatively generous. Of course I couldn't have done it without support. Ashley's been incredible. The word incredible landed in the space between them like a coin tossed to a street performer. A gesture, a token, not payment, not partnership, just acknowledgement that she had been present while he built empires. The investor's eyes flicked toward Ashley for half a second, the way people glance at furniture that matches the decor, and then returned to Liam. You're a lucky man. Liam's smile widened. I really am. Ashley smiled back. A small, practiced smile that cost her nothing because she had nothing left to spend. She had perfected this expression over years of standing in rooms like this one, listening to Liam rewrite their shared history into a solo performance, watching the world applaud him for work that had her fingerprints all over it. She used to correct him, gently, carefully, with the kind of soft-voiced precision that women learn when they need to assert themselves without being labeled aggressive, difficult, or bitter. We worked on that together, remember? I think the timeline was actually a bit different. That was my design, but I'm glad it worked out. But correction required an audience willing to hear it, and every time she tried, Liam's face would do this thing. This small, almost imperceptible tightening. His jaw would set. His eyes would go distant. He wouldn't argue. He wouldn't yell. He would just withdraw, pulling his warmth away like a hand lifted from her shoulder, leaving her cold and suddenly uncertain whether she had been wrong to speak at all. So she stopped speaking. She told herself it was maturity. She told herself secure people didn't need public credit. She told herself love meant celebrating his success without needing her name attached to it. But loyalty and self-erasure are not the same thing. Ashley was only beginning to learn the difference. The meeting wrapped with handshakes, congratulations, and promises of follow-up calls. Liam moved through the room like a man who had earned every inch of the space he occupied. Ashley gathered her things, slipped her untouched portfolio under her arm, and followed him out into the hallway. He was buzzing. She could always tell. Success made him electric, made him expansive, made him reach for her hand and pull her close in a way that felt like affection but functioned as possession. That went perfectly. Did you see Richard's face when I walked him through the projections? He's in. Fully in. Ashley nodded. You were great. Liam kissed the top of her head, distracted, already mentally spending money that hadn't cleared yet. We should celebrate. Dinner tonight. Somewhere nice. She wanted to ask him why he hadn't mentioned her contribution, why he had described 2 years of shared labor as a singular journey, why her name only appeared in his stories as set dressing, as background texture, as the woman who was there but not essential. But she didn't ask, because she already knew the answer. Liam didn't think he was erasing her. He genuinely believed the story he told. In his mind, He was the visionary, the architect, the one who made the hard calls and took the real risks. Ashley was supportive. Ashley was helpful. Ashley made things easier. But Ashley wasn't foundational. And the worst part, the part that kept her awake at night staring at the ceiling, was that she had started to believe him. When you hear a lie often enough, especially from someone you love, it starts to feel like truth. When the world reflects that lie back to you in every interaction, every introduction, every media mention, you begin to doubt your own memory. Maybe she had exaggerated her role. Maybe her contributions had been smaller than she remembered. Maybe Liam's version was accurate, and hers was just ego trying to claim importance she hadn't earned. Narrative erasure doesn't just steal credit. It makes you gaslight yourself. They walked to the car in silence. Liam scrolled through his phone, firing off texts to his lawyer, his publicist, his assistant. Ashley watched the city slide past the window and tried to remember the exact moment she had become invisible. It hadn't been sudden. It had been slow, incremental, 1,000 small erasures that accumulated like interest on a debt she didn't know she was paying. The first time he took credit for her idea, it had been so subtle she almost missed it. They were in the early days, still building, still dreaming in her kitchen over cold coffee and crumpled napkins covered in revenue models. She had been the one to see the gap, to articulate the need, to sketch out the framework that would become their entire business model. But when Liam pitched it to their first investor, the pronouns shifted. I developed, became the standard phrasing. My vision replaced our idea. She told herself it didn't matter. They were a team. His success was her success. Partnership required sacrifice. She hadn't understood yet that sacrifice and self-abandonment wear the same face. Over the months and years that followed, the pattern deepened. Liam's confidence grew in direct proportion to Ashley's shrinking sense of self. He became the voice of their work, the face of their brand, the name people recognized, and Ashley became the infrastructure, invisible, essential, unmarked. She managed the systems he found tedious. She maintained the relationships he considered secondary. She solved the problems before they became catastrophes, which meant no one ever saw her solve them. Her labor was the kind that only became visible in its absence, and because she never let it be absent, it was never seen. Liam valued her, she told herself. He just valued her differently. He needed her behind the scenes. He needed her to be the steady foundation while he was the charismatic face. That was partnership. That was balance. But balance requires equity, and there was nothing equitable about a relationship where one person got all the recognition and the other got the quiet satisfaction of knowing the truth. Except the quiet satisfaction was starting to feel like suffocation. They arrived at the restaurant, one of those places where the lighting is low and the prices are obscene and everyone speaks in hushed tones like they're discussing state secrets instead of Wagyu beef. Liam ordered wine without asking what she wanted. He always did. It was a small thing. Meaningless, probably. But small things accumulate. He talked through dinner about the expansion, the new hires, the media strategy. He used the word I 63 times. Ashley counted. She didn't mean to. She just noticed, the way you notice a song stuck in your head, the way you notice a door that doesn't quite close all the way. He used the word we 4 times. 3 of those times, he was talking about himself and the investor. Ashley ate her meal and made the appropriate noises of interest and support. She was good at this. She had practiced it for years. The art of being present without taking up space. The performance of enthusiasm that required no reciprocal energy from him. Liam reached across the table and took her hand. I couldn't do this without you. You know that, right? She looked at him. Really looked. Tried to find the man she had fallen for. The one who had seemed so certain in a world where she second-guessed everything. The one who had made her feel for a brief and shining moment like she was worth choosing. But all she saw now was a man who had built an empire on her invisible labor and convinced himself he had done it alone. I know. He squeezed her hand, satisfied, and went back to his phone. Ashley sat in the dim light of the restaurant and felt the first hairline fracture in the foundation of her loyalty. She didn't know yet what it meant. Didn't know where it would lead, but something inside her had shifted. She was starting to notice, and once you start noticing, you can't stop. The next morning, Ashley woke before dawn. Liam was still asleep, sprawled across 3/4 of the bed in the way of men who have never been taught to make themselves small. She slipped out quietly, made coffee in the dark kitchen, and opened her laptop. The company email archive stretched back 4 years. Thousands of threads, hundreds of decisions, a digital record of every conversation, every strategy session, every moment of collaboration that Liam had since rewritten as singular achievement. Ashley started reading. She didn't have a plan. Not yet. She just needed to know that her memory wasn't faulty. Needed proof that she hadn't invented her own importance. Needed to see, in her own words, time-stamped and documented, that she had been foundational. The evidence was everywhere. Her initial market analysis, sent to Liam 6 months before he claimed to have identified the gap himself. Her design for the operational infrastructure he now described as his innovation. Her solutions to problems he told investors he had solved through instinct and grit. Her late-night emails walking him through technical processes he still didn't fully understand. It was all there. A complete archive of the history Liam had erased. Ashley sat in the blue light of the screen and felt something cold and clarifying settle into her chest. Not anger, not yet. Just the terrible relief of knowing she hadn't been crazy. She had been gaslit. Systematically, consistently, by the man who claimed to love her. She didn't confront him. That would require a belief in her right to recognition, and she was still learning to access that belief. Instead, she did something quieter. She created a folder, private, password protected, and she started copying emails. Not because she had a plan, but because some instinct for survival told her that documentation was power. That evidence was insurance. That the person who controls the record controls the narrative. Liam walked into the kitchen an hour later, rumpled and smiling, and kissed her on the cheek. "You're up early. Couldn't sleep." He poured himself coffee, scrolled through his phone, and started talking about his day. Another meeting, another pitch, another opportunity to perform his singular genius. Ashley listened, smiled, responded with the appropriate level of enthusiasm. But beneath the performance, she was filing, cataloging, beginning to see the relationship not as a partnership, but as a structure of power. One where her silence upheld his authority, where her invisibility enabled his visibility, where her self-erasure was the necessary condition for his self-celebration. And she was starting to understand that she had collaborated in this structure, not because she was weak, but because she had been taught that this collaboration was virtue, that good women supported their men without needing recognition, that real love was selfless, which meant selfless, which meant disappearing bit by bit until there was nothing left but the role you played in someone else's story. Ashley was done disappearing. She just didn't know it yet. The weeks that followed felt like living in two realities at once. Externally, nothing changed. She continued to manage the systems that kept Liam's company running, continued to solve problems, maintain relationships, execute the invisible labor that made his visible success possible, continued to stand beside him at events, in meetings, in interviews, playing the role of supportive partner while he played the role of visionary leader. But internally, everything had changed. Ashley was watching now, really watching. And what she saw was a performance so consistent, so totalizing, that Liam seemed to have forgotten it was a performance at all. He genuinely believed he had built this alone. She saw it in the way he described challenges to journalists, framing every obstacle as something he had overcome through personal resilience, never mentioning the collaborative problem-solving that had actually produced solutions. She saw it in the way he accepted praise, with a humility that would have been admirable if it had included even a passing reference to her contributions. She saw it in the way he made decisions without consulting her, in spaces she had built, using frameworks she had designed. He wasn't lying, exactly. He had just rewritten history so many times that the edited version had become his truth, and the world had no reason to question it. At an industry panel 3 weeks after the investor meeting, Ashley sat in the audience and watched Liam hold court. The moderator asked about the company's origin story, and Liam launched into a narrative Ashley barely recognized. In his version, he'd been working in a field that frustrated him, saw an inefficiency no one else noticed, and spent months developing a solution in isolation. The loneliness of that process, the doubt, the moment of breakthrough when he finally cracked the model that would become their entire business. It was a good story, compelling, arc perfect, the hero's journey in startup form. It was also fiction. Ashley had been there from the beginning. The idea had emerged from their conversations, not his isolated genius. The model had been collaborative, iterative, built from her insights as much as his. The breakthrough hadn't been a singular moment of his clarity. It had been 3 weeks of late nights where she walked him through technical processes he didn't understand until he understood them well enough to describe them as instinct. But in Liam's story, Ashley appeared in exactly one sentence. Once I had the foundation built, I brought in some operational support to help scale. Operational support. 4 years of foundational labor reduced to a supporting role she hadn't auditioned for. The audience applauded. The moderator praised his vision. A woman in the front row asked how he stayed motivated during the hard early days. Liam smiled. I just kept reminding myself that if I could solve this, I could change the industry. That sense of purpose kept me going when nothing else could. Ashley sat in the back and felt the ache beneath her ribs sharpen into something with edges. She wasn't hurt anymore. Hurt implied surprise, implied that this was new. This was old. This was the operating system of their entire relationship. Liam took. Ashley gave. Liam shone. Ashley made the light possible. What she felt now was colder than hurt. It was clarity. After the panel, people swarmed Liam. Investors, competitors, aspiring entrepreneurs who wanted advice, proximity, validation. He moved through the crowd like someone born to this. Confident, generous with his time, encouraging to the young man who asked about breaking into the industry. Believe in your vision. Don't let anyone tell you it can't be done. If you're willing to outwork everyone else, you'll get there. Ashley stood to the side, holding her bag, waiting. A woman approached her, mid-50s, sharp-eyed, carrying the energy of someone who had clawed her way to every inch of success she had. You're with Liam, right? Ashley nodded. You must be so proud. The words were kind, sincere even, but they landed like an indictment. I am. The woman smiled. It's not easy, supporting someone at that level. My husband built a company too. I know how much work it is behind the scenes. They get the spotlight, we get the satisfaction of knowing we helped. That's the deal, right? She said it lightly, like a shared joke, like a truth so universal it didn't need questioning. Ashley managed to smile. Right, but inside, something was breaking. Not dramatically, not like glass shattering, like ice cracking under pressure. Slow, structural, inevitable. That night, alone in the bathroom while Liam took calls in the other room, Ashley looked at herself in the mirror and tried to remember the last time she had felt seen, not appreciated for what she did for him, not valued for the ways she made his life easier, but seen as a whole person, as someone whose thoughts mattered, whose contributions deserved acknowledgement, whose voice carried weight. She couldn't remember. The woman looking back at her from the mirror was a stranger, tired, quiet, carefully composed, the kind of woman who had learned to make herself small so someone else could grow large. Ashley hated her, not with heat, with the cold, steady disappointment you feel when you realize you've betrayed yourself. She pulled out her phone and opened the private folder she had been building. Dozens of emails now, documentation spanning years, a complete evidentiary record of contributions Liam described as his alone. She still didn't know what she was going to do with it, but she knew she wasn't deleting it. Over the following weeks, Ashley's strategic silence deepened. She stopped volunteering insights in meetings, stopped offering solutions before Liam asked, stopped doing the invisible work that made his visible work possible. Not all of it. She wasn't sabotaging, but she was withdrawing, quietly, incrementally, testing to see if anyone would notice. No one did. Liam continued to make promises she would have normally ensured he could keep, continued to take meetings she would have normally prepped him for, continued to project confidence in areas where his knowledge was surface level at best. And because Ashley wasn't filling the gaps anymore, the gaps started to show. An investor asked a technical question Liam couldn't answer. He laughed it off, promised to follow up, and moved on. Ashley could have stepped in. 6 months ago, she would have. But she stayed quiet, and the investor's expression shifted, just slightly, from impressed to uncertain. A partnership that Ashley had spent months cultivating started to fray because Liam made promises without understanding the operational requirements. The partner called Ashley directly, frustrated, asking if Liam actually understood what he had committed to. Ashley's answer was careful, diplomatic, but she didn't cover for him the way she used to, didn't smooth over his overreach, just acknowledged the concern and suggested the partner speak to Liam directly. The call ended badly. Liam blamed the partner, called them unreasonable, risk-averse, unwilling to think big. He never asked Ashley what had happened, never wondered why a relationship she had built was suddenly collapsing. He just assumed it was the partner's failure, not his. That assumption was its own kind of reveal. Ashley watched him navigate the fallout with a confidence that was becoming harder to distinguish from delusion. He believed so thoroughly in his own narrative that he couldn't see the contradictions, couldn't see that his authority was more performance than substance, couldn't see that the foundation he stood on was fracturing. She had built that foundation, and she was the only one who knew where the cracks were. Information became her silent country, a place she inhabited alone. She knew which investors were genuinely committed and which were waiting for an exit. She knew which partnerships were built on mutual value and which were held together by her relational work and Liam's charm. She knew which parts of the business were sustainable and which were elaborate facades. She knew where the money actually came from, where the ideas originated, who trusted them and why. Liam never thought to hide this information from her. Why would he? In his mental map of the world, Ashley was supportive, loyal, operationally helpful, but not strategic, not powerful, not someone who could use information against him. He had erased her so completely from his story of their success that he genuinely believed she was incapable of independent action that could affect him. That belief made him careless. He spoke freely in her presence about deals and doubts and vulnerabilities, left documents open on his laptop, discussed strategy with his lawyer while she was in the room, as though she were furniture, trusted her with passwords and access because it never occurred to him that access was power. Ashley didn't exploit it. Not yet. She just absorbed it, cataloged it, added it to the growing archive of things she knew and he had forgotten she knew. She was learning the strange power of invisibility. When people don't see you as a threat, they reveal everything. 3 months after the investor meeting, Liam was invited to speak at a major industry conference. It was the kind of opportunity that could cement his reputation, expand his network, establish him as a thought leader. He spent weeks preparing, writing the speech, rehearsing the delivery, obsessing over every slide in the deck. He didn't ask Ashley for input. He used to. In the early days, she had been his sounding board, the person who helped him refine his ideas, strengthen his arguments, anticipate questions. But somewhere along the way, he had stopped asking. Maybe because he no longer remembered that the ideas were hers too. Maybe because he no longer valued her strategic mind. Maybe because asking would have required seeing her as something other than operational support. Ashley didn't offer her input either. She just watched him prepare, watched him practice a narrative that erased her from their shared history, watched him build a presentation on frameworks she had designed without once acknowledging their origin. The night before the conference, Liam was nervous. She could tell. He paced the apartment, running through his opening lines, second-guessing his examples. He turned to her, suddenly vulnerable in the way he used to be before success hardened him. "Do you think it's good?" Ashley looked at him, at the man she had loved, the man she had built a business with, the man who had taken everything she gave and repackaged it as his singular achievement. "It's perfect," he exhaled, relieved. "I just want to get it right. This could change everything." She smiled, the same practiced smile she had worn in 1,000 rooms while he claimed credit for her work. "You're going to be great." He kissed her. Grateful, reassured, completely unaware that the woman standing in front of him had already started letting go. The conference was held in a glass-walled building downtown, all sharp angles and natural light, and the self-important energy of people who believe they are shaping the future. Ashley arrived separately. Liam had wanted to get there early, to network, to set the stage. She told him she would meet him there. She sat in the audience, 3 rows from the back, and watched Liam take the stage. He was good. She had to give him that. Charismatic, articulate, the kind of speaker who made complex ideas feel accessible, who made you believe he was sharing hard-won wisdom rather than repackaged insights. He talked about innovation, about risk, about the courage it takes to build something from nothing. He told the story of their company's founding as a story of his singular vision, the obstacles he overcame, the doubts he ignored, the moment he knew he was onto something that could change the industry. In his telling, Ashley appeared as a footnote, someone who joined later, someone who helped execute his vision, someone who made his life easier so he could focus on the important work. The audience was rapt. Ashley sat in the audience and felt the last thread of her loyalty snap, not loudly, not with drama, just a quiet, final severance, the moment when you stop making excuses, Stop rationalizing. Stop protecting someone who has never protected you. Liam was still talking, still performing, still claiming her work as his inheritance. But Ashley was done listening. She pulled out her phone, opened the private folder she had been building for months, looked at the archive of evidence, emails, documents, time-stamped records of every contribution he had erased. She had carried this information like a weight, proof that she hadn't imagined her own importance, proof that she had been foundational, but proof was only powerful if you were willing to use it. Ashley looked at the stage, at Liam, at the audience hanging on his every word, and she made a choice. Not revenge, not anger, just the cold, clarifying decision to stop collaborating in her own erasure. She didn't know yet exactly how it would unfold, but she knew it would, because she had spent years holding up a narrative that diminished her. And she was done holding. The foundation Liam stood on was more fragile than he knew, and Ashley was the only one who understood exactly where the cracks were. She closed the folder, put her phone away, and waited. Because the thing about authority built on erasure is that it only lasts as long as the erased stay silent, and Ashley's silence was ending. The applause started before Liam finished his final sentence. It built in waves, filling the conference hall with the sound of validation he had spent years chasing. He stood at the podium, backlit and triumphant, soaking in the recognition that came from telling a story everyone wanted to believe. The story of the self-made man, the lone visionary, the one who saw what others missed and had the courage to build it alone. Ashley didn't clap. She sat with her hands folded in her lap, watching the room rise to its feet, watching strangers celebrate a myth she had helped construct by staying silent. Her phone felt heavy in her pocket. The archive of truth, password protected and waiting. Liam left the stage to a crowd of people who wanted proximity to his success. They circled him like he was magnetic north, asking questions, exchanging business cards, offering investment interest and partnership opportunities. He was radiant in the center of it all. This was the culmination of everything he'd worked for, everything they had worked for, except only one of them was being celebrated. Ashley slipped out of the auditorium before anyone could ask her the question she had grown to hate. You must be so proud. As if pride was a sufficient substitute for recognition. As if watching someone else receive credit for your work was a privilege rather than an erasure. She walked 3 blocks before she realized she had nowhere to go. Home felt impossible. The apartment she shared with Liam was filled with the evidence of their life together, and she couldn't look at it right now without seeing the truth beneath the surface. The framed magazine cover with his face, the awards on the shelf with his name, the life they had built where his visibility required her invisibility. She found a coffee shop, sat in the back corner, ordered something she didn't drink. Her phone buzzed. A text from Liam. Where did you go? People want to meet you. She stared at the message. People want to meet you. Not people want to meet my partner. Not people want to meet the person who built this with me. Just the generic you, the +1, the accessory to his achievement. She typed and deleted 3 responses before settling on something neutral. Needed air. Congrats on the speech. The reply came immediately. Thanks. This is huge. I think we just landed 2 new investors. We. The word sat on her screen like a lie that didn't know it was lying. Ashley put her phone face down on the table and stared out the window at the people passing by. Strangers living their own invisible struggles. How many of them were making themselves smaller for someone else? How many had confused loyalty with self-abandonment? How many were one realization away from understanding that the relationship they were protecting was the same relationship that was destroying them? She didn't go home that night. She checked into a hotel, a small one, anonymous, the kind of place where no one asks questions and the room smells faintly of industrial cleaning solution and other people's temporary decisions. Liam called twice. She let it go to voicemail, texted that she wasn't feeling well, needed space, would see him tomorrow. He didn't push. He never did when she withdrew, because her needs had always been negotiable, always secondary, always something that could be addressed later when his more important priorities had been handled. Ashley sat on the edge of the hotel bed and opened her laptop. The email archive glowed in the dim light. 4 years of evidence. Conversations where she had originated ideas Liam now claimed as his instincts. Strategy documents she had written that became the foundation of his public presentations. Technical processes she had designed that he described as innovations he had developed through trial and error. The pattern was so consistent, it was almost beautiful in its completeness. A total erasure, not through malice, but through the slow, steady rewriting of history until the fiction became accepted fact. She had enabled this. That was the truth she was finally ready to face, not by being weak, but by being loyal to someone who had mistaken her loyalty for weakness. By believing that love meant sacrifice, even when the sacrifice was her sense of self. By staying quiet when she should have demanded to be seen. But she was learning a different vocabulary now. Ashley created a new document, titled it simply Timeline, and she began to write, not emotionally, not with anger or hurt, just facts, dates, documented contributions, a chronological record of who had done what, supported by the emails she had archived. It took her 4 hours. When she finished, she had a 15-page document that told a very different story than the one Liam had presented on stage. A story where the company's success was collaborative, iterative, built on her strategic insights as much as his charisma. A story where she wasn't operational support brought in later, but a CEO founder erased retroactively. She read it twice, looking for exaggeration, looking for places where her memory might have inflated her importance. But it was all there. Time-stamped, documented, undeniable. Ashley saved the document, backed it up in 3 places, and then she closed her laptop and lay back on the thin hotel pillow and felt something she hadn't felt in years. Clarity, not peace, not relief, just the cold, structural understanding of exactly what had been done to her and exactly what she was capable of doing about it. She fell asleep still dressed, her phone buzzing intermittently with texts from Liam that she didn't read. The next morning, Ashley went back to the apartment to shower and change. Liam was in the living room on his laptop, riding the high of post-conference momentum. He looked up when she walked in. "You feeling better?" She nodded. "Good, because I need you to pull together some materials for the investors who reached out yesterday. I want to move fast on this while the energy is hot." Ashley set her bag down. "What kind of materials?" "The operational breakdown, infrastructure, scalability metrics, the stuff you're good at. The stuff you're good at, not the stuff we built together, not our infrastructure, the stuff you're good at," as if her expertise was a service she provided rather than the foundation he stood on. "When do you need it?" "End of week?" She didn't argue, didn't point out that end of week meant she would be working 16-hour days while he took congratulatory calls and planned his next speaking engagement. She just nodded. "I'll get it done." Liam smiled. Grateful. Oblivious. "You're the best. I don't know what I'd do without you." The words were meant to be kind. Maybe he even believed they were kind, but they landed like an insult. Because what he meant was, "I don't know what I'd do without your labor, your support, your willingness to do the invisible work that makes my visible success possible." He didn't know what he would do without her. He was about to find out. Ashley spent the next 2 weeks moving through her life like someone on autopilot. She compiled the materials Liam requested, managed the systems that kept the business running, attended meetings where her contributions were absorbed into his strategic vision without attribution. But she was also doing something else. She was pulling threads. Not dramatically, not in ways that would be immediately visible, but she was quietly withdrawing the invisible labor that held everything together. Stopped prepping Liam for meetings. Stopped catching his mistakes before they became public. Stopped maintaining the relationships that required emotional intelligence he didn't possess. The effects were subtle at first. A client called, confused about a commitment Liam had made that contradicted their previous agreement. Ashley used to smooth those contradictions over, used to translate Liam's overpromising into workable reality. This time, she just forwarded the email to Liam with a brief note. "Client concern. Can you handle?" He handled it poorly. Made promises that would be impossible to keep. The client went quiet, not angry, just uncertain. An investor asked detailed questions about the financial projections Liam had presented. Questions that required understanding the operational nuances Ashley had built. Liam's answers were confident but vague. The investor followed up with Ashley directly. She answered truthfully, factually, without covering for the gaps in Liam's knowledge. The investor's concern was evident in the reply. "Let's table this for now." One by one, the cracks Ashley had been quietly documenting became visible to others. Liam noticed, but not in the way she expected. He didn't recognize the pattern. didn't see that the foundation was shifting. He just became frustrated with individual setbacks, blaming external factors. The client was unreasonable. The investor was risk-averse. The market was changing. It never occurred to him that the common variable was his own overreach, no longer buffered by Ashley's invisible labor. She watched him navigate these small failures with a detachment that would have been impossible 6 months ago. She didn't feel satisfaction exactly, just the quiet vindication of watching reality assert itself. Authority built on erasure is fragile. It only holds as long as the erased person keeps holding it up, and Ashley had stopped holding. 3 weeks after the conference, Liam was invited to participate in a panel discussion at an investor summit. High profile, well attended, the kind of opportunity that could lead to major capital and strategic partnerships. He prepared the way he always did now, alone, confident in his narrative, certain that his story would land because it always had. Ashley wasn't planning to attend. She told Liam she had other commitments. He barely registered her absence. He was too focused on the opportunity, on the performance, on the validation he was certain would come. But 2 days before the event, Ashley received a call from one of the panelists, a woman named Catherine Chen, founder of a venture firm known for backing women-led companies. Ashley had met her briefly at a networking event months ago. They had talked for maybe 10 minutes. Ashley hadn't thought much of it, but Catherine remembered. Ashley, I'm on a panel with Liam on Thursday, and I wanted to reach out to you directly. Ashley's pulse quickened. Careful. Okay. I've been doing some research on your company's history for due diligence, and I'm finding some interesting discrepancies in the timeline Liam presents publicly versus what the early documentation shows. Ashley said nothing, waiting. Catherine's voice was measured, professional, but there was an edge of something underneath. Curiosity, maybe, or recognition. I see your name on a lot of foundational documents, strategy memos, technical designs, early investor communications. But in every public mention, you're described as joining later to help with operations. That doesn't match the record. It doesn't. The admission hung in the air. Catherine exhaled. I'm not trying to create drama, but I'm moderating this panel, and I believe in accuracy, especially when it comes to who gets credit for building something. If you're willing to talk, I'd like to hear your version. Ashley sat down. Her hands were shaking. Why? Because I've watched too many women have their work erased by men who are better at self-promotion than collaboration. And because if I'm going to platform someone's success story, I want to make sure it's actually their story. Ashley closed her eyes. This was the moment, the choice point. She could protect Liam's narrative one more time. Could say it was complicated, could smooth it over, could stay invisible. Or she could choose herself. I'll talk to you. But I need you to understand something first. I'm not doing this for revenge. I'm doing it because I'm done being erased. Catherine's voice warmed. That's exactly why I called. They met the next day, a quiet restaurant far from the circles where Liam networked. Ashley brought her laptop, her archive, her timeline. She walked Catherine through 4 years of contributions that had been systematically written out of the company's history. Catherine listened without interrupting, took notes, asked clarifying questions, and when Ashley finished, she sat back and shook her head. This is unconscionable. Ashley felt the validation like oxygen after years of holding her breath. What are you going to do with this? Catherine met her eyes. I'm going to ask him about it. On the panel. Publicly. With you in the room. But only if that's what you want. This is your story. You get to decide when and how it gets told. Ashley thought about Liam on that stage at the conference. Radiant. Celebrated. Telling a story that erased her from her own life. She thought about the woman in the mirror she had stopped recognizing. The one who had made herself small so someone else could grow large. She thought about the years of invisible labor, the silence, the loyalty that had curdled into self-abandonment, and she made her choice. I'll be there. The investor summit was held in a hotel ballroom, all crystal chandeliers and corporate branding, and the hum of money looking for a home. Ashley arrived early, sat in the 3rd row, close enough to be visible, far enough to maintain distance. Liam arrived 20 minutes before the panel started. He was in his element, working the room, shaking hands, exchanging that particular kind of confident small talk that men who have never been dismissed learn early and wield often. He saw Ashley and looked momentarily surprised. She hadn't told him she was coming. He made his way over. I thought you had a conflict. It cleared up. He smiled. Pleased. Reached for her hand. I'm glad you're here. She let him hold her hand. Let him kiss her cheek. Let him believe, for a few more minutes, that everything was as it had always been. Then he was called to the stage. The panel was called Building from Zero Founder Stories. 4 entrepreneurs, all at different stages of growth, all with narratives of overcoming obstacles and scaling success. Catherine Chen sat in the moderator's chair, poised and precise. The first 30 minutes followed the predictable pattern. Each founder told their story. The audience asked questions. Catherine guided the conversation with the skill of someone who had done this 100 times. Liam was charismatic as always. He talked about vision and risk and the loneliness of early-stage building. He talked about the moment he knew he had something that could scale. He talked about the importance of focus, of singular commitment, of not letting other people's doubts become your own. The audience was engaged, impressed. Ashley could see investors in the front row taking notes. And then Catherine turned to Liam with a question that changed the temperature of the room. Liam, I want to go back to something you mentioned about the early days. You described the first 2 years as a solo journey. Is that accurate? Liam nodded. The first 2 years were just me, grinding, figuring it out. I didn't bring anyone else on until the infrastructure was solid enough to scale. Catherine glanced at her notes. That's interesting, because I've been reviewing some of the early documentation, strategy memos from the first 6 months, technical design documents, investor communications, and I'm seeing another name on a lot of those foundational materials. Ashley Monroe. The room went quiet. Liam's smile held, but something shifted behind his eyes. Ashley was incredibly helpful once she came on board. She handled a lot of the operational execution that allowed me to focus on strategy and growth. Catherine's expression didn't change. The documents I'm looking at are dated before the point you've described as her joining. In fact, some of the core strategic frameworks you've publicly credited as your innovations appear to have been co-authored with her. Can you speak to that? Liam's jaw tightened. Just slightly. The room felt it. I think there might be some confusion about timelines. Ashley and I worked closely together, obviously, but the vision, the core idea, that was mine. She helped me execute it. Catherine let the answer hang in the air for a beat. Then she did something unexpected. She looked directly at Ashley. Ashley, you're here today. Would you like to respond to that? Every head in the room turned. Ashley's heart was hammering. This was it. The moment where she could stay silent one more time, could protect Liam's story, could remain invisible, or she could speak. She stood, not because she wanted the spotlight, but because staying seated felt like staying erased. Her voice was calm, steady, the voice of someone who had finally chosen self-worth over loyalty to someone who had never earned it. The timeline Liam just described isn't accurate. I wasn't brought on later to handle operations. I was there from the beginning. The initial market analysis was mine. The operational framework was mine. The technical infrastructure he's describing as his innovation was something we designed together, with significant portions that I developed independently. The room was completely silent now. Liam's face had gone tight. Ashley, this isn't the place. She ignored him, kept her eyes on Catherine. I have documentation, emails, strategy memos, time-stamped records that show a very different story than the one that's been told publicly. I'm not saying Liam didn't contribute. He did. But this wasn't a solo journey. It was a partnership, and I've been erased from that partnership so completely that even he seems to believe his own edited version. Someone in the audience gasped, quietly, but in the silence, it was audible. Catherine's voice was gentle but firm. Liam, do you want to respond? Liam's charm had evaporated. What remained was something raw, defensive. I think Ashley is misremembering the division of labor. She was involved, yes, but the strategic vision, the risk, the leadership, that was mine. I think it's unfortunate that she's choosing to relitigate this here instead of privately. Ashley felt the old familiar pull, the urge to back down, to soften, to make this easier for him, but she didn't. I tried privately. For 4 years, every time you took credit for work we did together, every time you described our company as your singular achievement, every time you introduced me as operational support instead of a CEO founder, I tried quietly, and you never heard me. So I'm saying it publicly. I was foundational. And I'm done being written out of my own story. The room erupted in murmurs. Investors whispering to each other, other founders looking uncomfortable, Catherine maintaining control but clearly letting this unfold. Liam stood. This is inappropriate. I'm not going to sit here and be ambushed. Catherine's voice cut through. Sit down, Liam. It wasn't a request. Liam sat. Catherine turned back to Ashley. Do you have this documentation with you? Ashley held up a thumb drive. Everything. 4 years of emails, memos, and records that tell a different story than the one Liam has been selling. Catherine extended her hand. May I see it? Ashley walked it to the front of the room, handed it to Catherine. The walk felt like miles, every eye on her. But for the first time in years, being seen didn't feel like exposure. It felt like reclamation. Catherine plugged the drive into her laptop, projected the screen onto the display behind the panel, opened the first document. It was an email from Ashley to Liam, dated 6 months before he claimed to have started the company. Subject line, market gap analysis and proposed solution. Catherine read the date aloud. This is 18 months before you've publicly stated the company was founded. She opened another document, a technical design spec with Ashley's name in the author field. Another, a strategy memo outlining the exact business model Liam had described in his conference speech as his breakthrough insight. The evidence was undeniable. Liam's face had gone from defensive to pale. The room was watching in real time as a carefully constructed narrative collapsed under the weight of documentation. Catherine turned off the projector, looked at Liam. Do you want to revise your story? Liam's voice was quiet, stripped of its usual confidence. I built this company. Ashley spoke from her seat. We built it, and you took it. The silence that followed was total. One of the other panelists, a woman who had been sitting quietly, spoke up. I think we all just witnessed something important. Not just about this specific company, but about whose stories get told and whose get erased. Thank you, Ashley, for having the courage to speak. The audience began to clap, slowly at first, then building. They weren't clapping for Liam anymore. Liam stood, walked off the stage, didn't look back. Ashley sat in her seat and felt something break open inside her chest. Not pain, relief. The profound, destabilizing relief of finally telling the truth after years of protecting a lie. The panel ended early. Catherine dismissed the audience and made her way to Ashley. Are you okay? Ashley nodded. She wasn't sure it was true, but it was the only answer she had. What you just did took incredible courage. I just got tired of disappearing. Catherine smiled. You're not disappeared anymore. The rest of the day was a blur. People approached Ashley, some to offer support, some to ask questions. A few investors who wanted to hear her vision, her plans, her side of the story without Liam's framing. One investor, a man in his 60s who had been sitting in the front row, shook her hand. I almost wrote a check to Liam last month. I'm glad I waited. If you're looking for capital to build something on your own terms, call me. He handed her his card. Ashley took it, stared at it. Her hands were still shaking. She left the summit alone, walked back to the hotel where she had been staying on and off for the past 2 weeks. The apartment she shared with Liam felt impossible now. That life, that version of herself, was over. Her phone was filled with texts, some from Liam, angry, defensive, accusing her of betrayal, of sabotage, of airing private matters publicly. She deleted them without reading past the first line. There were other texts, too, from colleagues, from people she hadn't spoken to in months, from women she barely knew who had watched the panel and wanted her to know they saw themselves in her story. One message stood out, from Catherine. You just changed the trajectory of your life. It's going to be hard for a while, but you're going to be okay. Better than okay. You're going to be free. Ashley sat on the hotel bed and let herself cry. Not from sadness, from release. From the overwhelming weight of finally choosing herself after years of choosing someone else. She had lost the relationship, lost the shared life, lost the fantasy that loyalty and love were the same thing. But she had found something more valuable. She had found her voice. Let me talk to you for a minute. If you're listening to this story and you feel something tightening in your chest, like recognition, like grief, like anger you've been swallowing for too long, I need you to stay with me. Because what you just watched wasn't just Ashley's story. It's a mirror, and maybe you're seeing yourself in it. Maybe you're the person who's been making yourself smaller so someone else can shine. Maybe you've been doing invisible work while someone else takes visible credit. Maybe you've convinced yourself that real love, real partnership, real loyalty means never asking to be seen. And maybe you're starting to realize that you've been wrong. Here's what I need you to understand. Loyalty without reciprocity isn't love. It's extraction. When only one person in a relationship is expected to sacrifice, to stay quiet, to sublimate their needs and their voice, that's not partnership. That's a power structure, and the person benefiting from that structure will never voluntarily change it. Why would they? It's working perfectly for them. Ashley stayed silent for 4 years, not because she was weak, because she had been taught that silence was virtue, that good partners don't need recognition, that secure people don't require acknowledgement, that love means celebrating someone else's success without needing your name attached to it. But those teachings are lies designed to keep certain people powerful and other people invisible. Your contributions don't lose value because someone refuses to acknowledge them. The work you did, the insights you offered, the problems you solved, the infrastructure you built, all of that is real. It doesn't disappear just because it's not recognized. But here's the harder truth. If you're the only one who knows what you've contributed, if you're the only one carrying the record of your own value, you're living in a story someone else is controlling. And you have more power than you think. The people who erase you are counting on your silence. They're counting on your loyalty. They're counting on you valuing the relationship more than you value yourself. And as long as those things are true, nothing changes. But the moment you choose yourself, the moment you stop holding up a narrative that diminishes you, the moment you speak the truth even when it costs you the relationship, everything shifts. It won't be easy. I'm not going to lie to you and say that choosing yourself is painless. Ashley lost the relationship. She lost the shared life. She lost the future she thought she was building. That loss is real. That grief is valid. But what she gained was bigger. She gained herself back. And if you're in a relationship, a job, a friendship, any dynamic where your value is invisible, where your voice is dismissed, where your contributions are absorbed into someone else's success story, I need you to hear this. You're not selfish for wanting to be seen. You're not difficult for expecting reciprocity. You're not bitter for refusing to keep making yourself small. You're done, and that's okay. So here's what I'm praying for you tonight. I'm praying for clarity, the kind that cuts through all the rationalizations, all the excuses, all the stories you've been telling yourself about why it's okay to be treated as less than you are. I'm praying you see the truth of your situation with clean eyes, not through the lens of hope that things will change, but through the lens of what actually is. I'm praying for courage, because seeing the truth is one thing. Acting on it is another, and walking away from what's familiar, even when what's familiar is hurting you, takes a kind of bravery most people never have to access. But you have it. I know you do. Because you're still here, still listening, still looking for a way forward. I'm praying for documentation. I know that sounds practical, maybe even cold, but if you're in a situation where your work is being taken, where your contributions are being erased, start keeping records, not because you're planning to go to war, but because you need to protect your own sanity. You need proof that you're not imagining your value. Emails, timestamps, records of what you built and when. That documentation isn't paranoia. It's self-preservation. I'm praying that you recognize the difference between loyalty and self-abandonment. Loyalty is mutual. It's reciprocal. It honors both people. Self-abandonment is one-sided. It asks you to disappear so someone else can be visible. And if you've been calling self-abandonment loyalty, it's time to learn a new vocabulary. I'm praying that when you finally speak your truth, when you finally stop protecting a narrative that erases you, the people who matter will listen. And the people who don't, the people who get defensive, who gaslight you, who accuse you of being vindictive or bitter or ungrateful, those people are showing you exactly who they are. Believe them. I'm praying for the strength to lose what needs to be lost. Because sometimes the relationship can't be saved. Sometimes the only choice is between staying erased or leaving whole. And I'm praying you choose wholeness every single time. I'm praying that you find people who see you, not people who appreciate what you do for them, but people who value who you are. People who don't need you to be smaller so they can be larger. People who celebrate your voice instead of silencing it. And I'm praying that you understand something Ashley learned the hard way. You were never invisible. You were only treated that way by people who needed you to be small. But your presence, your contribution, your voice, all of that has weight. It always did. And the moment you stop letting other people diminish it, the world adjusts. So if you're tired of being erased, stop participating in your own erasure. If you're tired of being unheard, stop waiting for permission to speak. If you're tired of being undervalued, stop accepting relationships where your value is negotiable. You deserve to be seen, fully, accurately, without having to beg for it. And if the people in your life can't offer you that, it's time to find new people. You're going to be okay, better than okay. You're going to be free. Now let's see how this ends. Ashley didn't go back to the apartment. She hired movers to pack her things while Liam was out. Left behind everything they had purchased together, everything that carried the weight of their shared history. Took only what was individually hers. It felt both devastating and clarifying. 2 weeks later, she received a call from Catherine. I've been talking to some people, investors who were impressed with what you said at the summit. They want to know if you have plans to build something on your own. Ashley stared out the window of her new apartment. Small, quiet, hers. I don't know yet. That's okay. But when you do, call me. Because there's capital waiting for a founder who actually built what she says she built. Ashley hung up and felt the strange vertigo of possibility. She had spent so long building someone else's dream that she had forgotten she was capable of having her own. Over the following months, pieces of her story found their way into industry conversations. Not because Ashley was publicizing it, but because the people who had witnessed the panel kept talking, kept asking questions, kept reassessing narratives they had accepted without scrutiny. Liam's reputation shifted, not destroyed, but complicated. Investors started asking harder questions. Journalists started digging into the company's origin story. The myth of the self-made visionary began to crack under the weight of inconvenient facts. He tried to control the damage, gave interviews where he acknowledged Ashley's contributions in vague, minimizing terms, described their split as a difference in vision rather than a reckoning over erasure. But the people who mattered saw through it. Ashley didn't follow his narrative rehabilitation closely. She was too busy building her own foundation, slowly, carefully, with investors who valued transparency, with partners who saw collaboration as mutual rather than extractive. She didn't want revenge. She wanted something simpler and harder. She wanted to build something where her name was on it from the beginning, where her contributions were visible, where her voice carried weight. 6 months after the summit, Ashley launched her own company, smaller than what she had built with Liam, but entirely hers. The press release was straightforward, no dramatic claims, no shots fired at her former partner, just a clear statement of what she was building and why. Within a week, she had 3 investment offers. One came from the man who had approached her at the summit. His note was brief. I invest in founders who know how to build infrastructure, not just tell stories about building infrastructure. Let's talk. They did. The terms were fair. The partnership was transparent. And for the first time in years, Ashley sat across the table from someone who saw her as a strategic leader rather than operational support. It felt like coming back to life. She hired carefully, built a team where contributions were acknowledged, where collaboration was real, where no one had to make themselves small for someone else to shine. Word got around. Other women who had been erased from their own stories started reaching out, not for jobs, just for connection, for the relief of talking to someone who understood what it felt like to be foundational and invisible. Ashley started meeting with them, informally at first. Coffee conversations that became mentorship relationships. She didn't have all the answers, but she had walked the path from erasure to reclamation, and that path was still fresh enough that she could describe it clearly. One woman, young and brilliant and making herself smaller for a business partner who took her ideas and repackaged them as his own, asked Ashley the question that mattered. How did you know when it was time to leave? Ashley thought about it, about the years of rationalization, the slow accumulation of erasure, the moment when loyalty finally broke under the weight of self-abandonment. When I realized I was protecting his story more than I was protecting myself. The woman nodded, tears in her eyes. I think I'm there. Then you already know what to do. You're just looking for permission. So, here it is. You're allowed to leave. You're allowed to choose yourself. You're allowed to stop making yourself invisible for someone who doesn't see you anyway. 3 months later, that woman left her partnership, started her own firm. Sent Ashley a message on launch day. I took everything I built and I'm building it again. Under my own name this time. Thank you for showing me it was possible. Ashley read the message and felt the profound satisfaction of watching someone else choose themselves. This was the real victory. Not the public reckoning with Liam, not the vindication, not even the success of her own company. The victory was in becoming the kind of person who no longer abandoned herself for someone else's comfort. A year after the summit, Ashley was invited to speak at a conference for women in business. The topic was leadership. The audience was full of women at various stages of their careers. Some were just starting, some had been building for decades. Ashley stood on the stage and told her story. Not the sanitized version, not the version that protected Liam or made her seem noble in her suffering. The real version. The one where she had collaborated in her own erasure because she had confused loyalty with love. She talked about the cost of silence, the weight of invisible labor, the way erasure happens slowly until you can't remember what it felt like to be seen. And then she talked about the choice, the hard, terrifying, necessary choice to stop participating in your own diminishment. The audience was silent, rapt. When she finished, a woman in the front row raised her hand. What would you say to someone who's afraid that leaving means losing everything? Ashley met her eyes. You're not losing everything. You're losing a version of yourself that was never supposed to be permanent. The small version, the quiet version, the erased version. And yes, that loss will hurt. But what you gain is bigger. You gain yourself back. And once you have that, you can build anything. The applause started before she left the stage. Afterward, women lined up to talk to her, to thank her, to tell her their own stories of erasure and reclamation, to ask for advice on documentation, on timing, on finding the courage to speak. Ashley listened to every one of them, stayed until the last person had been heard, because she remembered what it felt like to be invisible, and she would never take visibility for granted again. That night, alone in her hotel room, Ashley opened her laptop and looked at the company she had built. Small, but growing. Profitable, sustainable. Hers. She thought about Liam. Wondered if he ever understood what he had lost. Not her labor, though that too, but the partnership that could have been real if he had been willing to see her. She didn't hate him. Hate required energy she didn't want to spend. She just saw him clearly now. A man who had built his authority on someone else's erasure and called it success. His company was struggling. She had heard. Investors pulling back. Partnerships dissolving. The infrastructure she had built and then withdrawn was revealing its absence. She didn't feel satisfaction in his struggle, just the quiet acknowledgement that foundations built on lies are fragile. Ashley closed her laptop, looked out at the city lights. She had taken everything Liam valued most. Not his money, not his reputation, though that had shifted. She had taken something more fundamental. She had taken his narrative control, his ability to tell a story where he was the hero and she was the backdrop, his authority built on her erasure. And in taking that, she had reclaimed the thing she valued most. Her voice, her visibility, her sense of self. She wasn't a footnote in someone else's story anymore. She was the author of her own. And that, finally, was enough. If this story moved you, if you saw yourself in Ashley's silence or her reclamation, then you're exactly where you're supposed to be. This channel isn't about fairy tales. It's about the real, complicated, messy work of choosing yourself when everything in you has been trained to choose someone else. It's about power and dignity and the courage it takes to walk away from what's destroying you. We're building something here. A family of people who understand that love stories aren't just about romance. They're about self-worth. They're about the moment you stop making yourself small. They're about voices that have been silenced finding the strength to speak. So, if you haven't already, subscribe to the Billionaire Romance family. Hit that button. Turn on notifications. Because every story we tell here is about someone refusing to stay erased. Someone choosing themselves. Someone understanding that their voice, their contribution, their presence matters. You deserve to see yourself in stories where the quiet ones win, where the overlooked ones rise, where choosing yourself is always, always the right ending. Drop a comment and let me know what resonated. Tell me your story if you're ready. Or just let me know you're here. Because this community sees you, even when the world doesn't. I'll see you in the next one. And remember, you were never invisible. You were just surrounded by people who needed you to be small. That ends now.